Chapter 10, The Book of Kin. Yes, the words are certainly simple, all right, I observed. Just why are the forces of darkness supposed to tremble at hearing them? They are afraid of what is behind the words, replied Anastasia. Do you know who will write this book? And how many pages it will have? How many? And who will write them? Just a few days will go by, and millions of fathers and mothers in many a land will be writing the Book of Kin, filling in its pages with their own hand. There will be a vast multitude of them, these books of kin, and all of them will contain the truths which begin in the heart for their children. There will be no room in these books for artifice or guise. Before them all the lies of history will fall. You can surmise what would happen, Vladimir, if you could take into your hands today a book which your ancestor of old had begun to write especially for you. Then another would continue the writing, eventually your grandfather, and your father, and your mother. The books read by man today include many that are devised with a specific aim in mind, namely the distortion of history and the meaning of life. Many false dogmas are especially designed to disorient man in space. This is not easily discernible all at once, but clarity comes directly. A son reads a book of his forebears, which his father and mother have continued personally for him. Anastasia, not everyone knows how to write a book. Everyone can if they feel the demand to do so, if they are looking to protect their children and in the future themselves from false dogmas. In Vedic times, every father and mother would write a book of kin for their future children and grandchildren. This book was not comprised of words, but of deeds. Children could read created space like a book and understand the deeds and the thoughts of their parents, and were happy to inherit a happy space. Only one thing was missing from that book. Children were not alerted to the world of the occult. It was not part of the complete awareness of the omniscient Vedans. Footnote pronounced Vedun. In Slavic and Hindu traditions, a revered wise man. Like the word Vedic, it is derived from the Old Slavic, originally Indo-European root Ved, meaning knowledge or full awareness. Now that all mankind has been able to detect their own experience, the devastating influences exerted on them by occult dogmas, they will certainly be able to protect their children from them. Even if there are not yet any domains to bloom in the spring, thoughts about them are already alive in many human hearts. They need to start writing a book precisely about their thoughts for their children. Why, Anastasia, does every parent need to write? Look, I've written books about domains, and an architect from the suburb of Medvedkovo is working on his design for a whole settlement. Footnote, the northern Moscow suburb, Medvedkovo, a northern Moscow suburb founded in the 16th century as the estate of Vasily Fyodorovich Pozharsky, who bore the nickname of Medved, or bear. Note that this word includes the roots med, for honey, and ved, for know, as in knowledge. The bear was originally named in Russian for his knowledge of where honey could be found. Besides, there is a flurry of internet discussions on the subject. Isn't that enough? It is not enough, Vladimir. Take a look at what has been going on. You have been writing books, but other people are writing books too, to counteract yours. There are so many books that a man could not hope to read even half of them over his lifetime. And look, there is a daily flow of information to man that does not come from books. And even though it seems very diversified, all that information really comes down to the same result. It justifies and glorifies the unreal world of the occult. What can help the newcomer to the world? What can help the newcomer to the world determine where the truth and where the falsehood lies? The holy temple of the family will help in this, the Book of Kin. In it, a mother and a father will write for their son and daughter about what is the most important thing that needs to be created for happiness in life. The children will continue to record the Book of Kin. There will be no wiser and truer books for families anywhere on the earth. All the knowledge of their pristine origins will be poured into it. Anastasia, how can knowledge of one's pristine origins turn up in a book which people are only beginning to write today? Where are they going to find such knowledge? You said that the culture of our forebears and their books were all destroyed. Those that will begin to write already have this knowledge concealed within themselves. It is preserved within each one of us. When people think deeply and begin to write, not just for anybody, but for their children, all the knowledge of their pristine origins will be revealed within them and come to light. So that means that before they start to write, they first need to think, so that wise thoughts may be set forth right from the very first pages of the book. The first pages may be outwardly very simple. Can you give me some examples? When was the man who began to write this Book of Kin born? What was his name? For what purpose and with what thoughts did he take pen in hand and approach the pages of this most important book? And what did he plan to create in the future? Such a book, I observed, would be easy to begin for anyone who, let's say, has been a famous artist, or a governor, or a scholar, or a die-hard entrepreneur. But what about someone who has simply lived a life? Say someone's been working and can barely make ends meet. He scarcely earns enough for food and clothing. What could he possibly write for his children, and what advice could he possibly give them? The rulers of today, and those who bask before the public in rays of glory, and those who have accumulated a whole lot of money, will find it difficult from now on to have an answer for their children. People quickly forget their deeds of yesteryear, but what a man has contributed to his future will be appreciated by future generations. Are you or anybody else in the habit of recalling past governors, famous artists, or entrepreneurs? No, not very often. Rather, I don't really think about them at all. I don't even know their names, but children will take great pride in remembering what their parents did. And their children will try to forget. They will be ashamed just at the mention of their parents' names. Why should the children be ashamed? Because fate offered their parents such great opportunities that they could not grasp the fact that fate is affording us opportunities only, invariably, for the purpose of creating the future. In his one lifetime, man should be endeavoring to create the next life for himself, a life in which he can embody himself anew and live forever. Every man can even today plan out a domain and a space of love. They can create their design and try to obtain the land. They can use that land to plant a few saplings or plant seeds of family trees. Perhaps they will not be able to grow to maturity, say, a whole grove, or a green hedge, or a splendid garden in their lifetime. Perhaps a poor old man will not even be able to lay a foundation for his house, but he will be able to write in the Book of Kin for his grandchildren and for his children. I was poor. It was only in my old age that I began to think on the meaning of life, on what I have handed to my children. And I have created a plan for space for our family. I have described it for you, my children, in a book. I have been able to plant 9 fruit trees in the garden, as well as just 1 tree on the spot where a grove will grow. The years will flow on. The grandson will read that book and remember his grandfather. He will go up to the mighty, majestic cedar or oak, growing amidst a lot of other trees on the land of his kin's domain. His thought, overflowing with love and gratitude, will soar into space, will merge with his grandfather's thought, and then a new plane of being will be born for the both of them. A whole life in eternity is afforded to man. The settling of the earth and the planets of the universe is nothing more than a transformation for each man within himself. The Book of Kin will help convey the glad tidings to one's descendants and help the soul of the beginning writer to once again embody itself upon the earth. Well, Anastasia, you attach such importance to this book, but I too have the desire to start writing one for my descendants. I have the intuitive feeling that in this idea of yours about the book is something most unusual and grand. Wow, it's quite a name. The Book of Kin. The Kin's Book. The most holy book for the family. But what should it be written on? Ordinary paper will yellow and disintegrate. The binding on notebooks and albums tend to look rather primitive. After all, if the book is destined for one's descendants, if, as you say, it is of such great importance, then the paper and the binding should correspond too. What do you think? What should be used? That kind, for example. And she nodded off in the direction of a book lying on my desk. I followed her gaze, and a moment later I was holding something quite extraordinary in my hands. Some time ago, a man named Sergei from Novosibirsk had sent me a copy of my Anastasia. The customary publisher's binding had been cut off, the pages transferred to another. I was going to say binding, but that's not the right word for what these pages had been put into. A Siberian craftsman had created an extraordinary work of art. The whole cover, including the spine, had been made out of valuable species of wood. The edges were of beech, with cedar inside the frame. All the details were decorated with finely carved ornaments, text, and illustrations. One could hardly apply the ordinary term cover to all of this. The term casing would probably be more appropriate. The front and back parts were fastened together, on one side by the spine and the other by a little lock. All the little parts were finely fitted together. When the book was closed, the pages were evenly positioned between the front and the back parts of the casing, thus preventing the paper from buckling under conditions of either high or low humidity. The pages would not flutter, even from a draft of air, in contrast to some of the other books which I put beside it for comparison. Many visitors who saw this work of art would hold it for a long time in their hands, looking it over carefully, with joyful admiration. Following Anastasia's gaze, I took the book with the wooden casing into my hands. I felt its warmth and began to understand. Perhaps it was thanks to this extraordinary work that I really understood the tremendous significance of the Book of Kin Anastasia had been talking about. She sat there meekly on the chair beside me, her hands modestly resting on her knees, but I got the feeling that she was wiser than all the priests and dynastic leaders, right from the ancient times, wiser than our modern analysts. And through her wisdom and purity of thought, she is able to overcome all the negative manifestations in human society. Where did these capabilities of her come from? What school or system of child raising can endow man with such abilities? Wow, what an unusual, incredible step to think up. A Book of Kin. I couldn't stop myself from letting my mind get carried away, and just look what a grand thing she's come up with. Nobody has so far been able to counteract the flood of various kinds of suggestions which have been rushing at people in different countries minute by minute, first and foremost, at our children. Suggestions. Our TV features a constant parade of action films, supposedly for the purpose of public entertainment, but in actual fact demonstrating how splendidly man can provide for his financial well-being through violence. Suggestions. How great it must be to be a famous singer, to bask in the spotlight and the applause, to gad about receptions and luxurious limousines. Suggestions. If it weren't for the power of suggestion, they would also need to show other, considerably longer segments from the life of these people. The most challenging everyday work routines, the never-ending intrigues instigated by entertainment rivals, the never-ending attacks by jealous wannabes, not to mention the paparazzi hoping to make money on the backs of the celebrities under the so-called freedom of the press. One particularly monstrous suggestion comes in the form of aggressive and sophisticated advertising which is ready to promote anything as long as you pay the money. Suggestions. Never-ending news about all sorts of international do-good foundations coupled with Wonder Boy politicos. And people are left with the impression that it is only thanks to our politicians that they can live all warm, fed, and cozy in their homes. And then when the radiators go cold, people no longer bother asking themselves questions about how they can change their lives, how they can become independent of central heating, electricity, and water supply. Instead, they madly rush into the streets and shout, "Gimme!" A suggestion of their own helplessness. Such false dogmas are being suggested to adults and children alike. Children. How can we talk about raising children as long as we parents just stand on the sidelines? First, we entrust the delivery of our children to strangers in an unfamiliar medical institution. Then we allow strangers to teach them in kindergarten and school. Then we allow them to be exposed to a plethora of explicit or disguised pornographic literature on our store shelves. We allow strangers to recommend books and textbooks for our children to read. We allow strangers to produce TV programs for them. Who finds it profitable to hold the whole system of child raising in their hands? Maybe that's not the important question. Maybe what's more important is our feeling of utter helplessness and insignificance. We feel we're totally incapable of putting a stop to such lawlessness, but this is not true. Any parent can do it, if only he wants to, if only he thinks about it. The Book of Ken. What a superior idea. The end of lawless commercial suggestions. Such lawlessness may still flex its muscles and show off a little, but it won't be long before the man takes in his hands the Book of Ken and finds there written by the hand of his grandfather, grandmother, father, mother, a statement of man's purpose in life. We, today's parents, shall certainly be able to figure out what this purpose is. Most definitely. We are experienced. We've seen, heard, and gone through a lot lately. We only need to pause for just a wee bit. Turn away from the flood of suggestions and think for ourselves with our own heads. For certain, every parent must think about this. By himself. Only by himself. There is no point in looking for answers to questions on the meaning of life in books of wisdom from past centuries, no matter how celebrated or promoted these books are. And there's no point in seeking answers in the works of wise men whose reputation is thousands of years old. These wise men were great preachers and messiahs. They endeavored to preach and leave writings for future generations. But there is not one, not even one of these great works that we shall ever see. They have been most cleverly destroyed. This can be clearly understood if one but stops and thinks. Just look and see what a difference it makes. How switching a single comma around in a brief sentence can change the whole meaning of a message. Remember the famous example. Execute never, comma, show mercy. As opposed to execute, comma, never show mercy. And how many similar alterations have crept into the works of these ancient thinkers, either deliberately or inadvertently, at the hands of copyists, translators, publishers, historians? Are we talking here not just about changes in punctuation, but the deletion of whole pages, whole chapters, and the writing of one's own interpretations? The result is that we today are living on some kind of illusory world. Mankind is constantly at war. People keep destroying each other like hell and can't understand why wars do not stop. But how can they stop if mankind has not even once been able to determine who has been instigating these wars? It hasn't been able to because there has been no independent thought, and without independent thought, it accepts suggestions as the truth. Who started the Second World War? Who fought with them? Who won? The whole world community is convinced that the war was started by Hitler's Germany under Hitler. Victory was achieved by the Soviet Union under Stalin. And these half-truths, or rather delusions, are accepted by the majority as absolute, unequivocal, historical facts. And only a very few historical researchers occasionally mention Hitler's spiritual mentors. For example, the Russian Lama Gurdjieff, acting through Karl Hoshofer. Hitler had one other spiritual mentor, Dietrich Eckart. Footnotes. Georgy Ivanovich Gurdjieff, 1872 to 1949, a Greek Armenian mystic later based in Paris. In 1922, he founded the Institute for the Harmonious Development of Man. He emphasized the principle of self-awareness and the need to awaken from the dreamlike state that most human existence seems to be. Gurdjieff authored a number of books, including the well-known Beelzebub's Tale to his grandson. Footnote again. Karl Ernst Hoshofer, 1869 to 1946, German geopolitician, believed to have influenced Hitler's expansionist policies. He was an avid student of Japanese culture and was instrumental in forging Germany's alliance with Japan following Hitler's rise to power in 1933. He is linked to Gurdjieff's. His link to Gurdjieff is a matter of some controversy. Dietrich Eckart, German occultist who was very close to Hitler. Historians know of contacts these spiritual mentors had with their superiors, part of a more elevated hierarchy. But at this point, nobody any longer mentions names. Researchers say only that they have traced the connections to the Himalayas and Tibet, as well as both open and secret occult societies existing at the time in Germany, and confirm Hitler's participation in them. Germany witnessed the rise of organizations such as the German Order and the Thule Society. The latter's emblem was the swastika together with a wreath and a sword. Footnote, German Order, a religious order founded for charitable purposes, known from the 12th century as the Teutonic Order, abolished on occasion by both Napoleon and Hitler. It still exists today in both Germany and Austria. The term German Order was also applied to the highest decoration awarded by the Nazi Party, Thule Society, a German occultist group in Munich, named from the Greek word meaning farthest northern land, founded in 1910 by Dietrich Eckart. It is said to have sponsored the German Labour Party, which Hitler later transformed into the Nazi Party. Someone was clearly and deliberately shaping their own unique, brand new ideology in Germany, inculcating in its population a specific type of worldview. The upshot was a large-scale war and masses of human casualties, followed by the Nuremberg trials where Hitler's cronies were tried. But those who appeared before the court were ordinary soldiers. Even if they had happened to be generals or field marshals, they were still soldiers, including Hitler himself. Foot soldiers to the unseen priest who shaped the ideology. He, the chief strategist and organizer, was not even mentioned in the trial records. Who is he? Who are his closest secret associates and assistants? Is it all that important to know about them? It is important, extremely important. After all, it is they who masterminded the war, and as long as they are allowed to remain in the shadows, they will start it again. With their growing experience, new wars will be even more sophisticated and on an even more massive scale. What were these people really after, the masterminds behind the Second World War? Perhaps an examination of the following fact will bring us closer to solving the mystery. For the Nazi ideologists in Germany at that time, there was an organization known as Annenerbe, Annenerbe, which collected ancient books from all over the world. In the first place, they were interested in old Russian editions of the pre-Christian period. One can trace a rather bizarre chain: the Himalayas, Tibet, lamas, secret societies, all leading to a relentless hunt for the knowledge of our forebears from pagan Russia. We Russians saw no need to preserve the manuscripts, but somebody else found them to be a vital necessity. Why? What secrets did this knowledge harbor within itself? Secrets which evidently had much more of an edge to them than anything known to the Tibetan monks. But how to gain access to even one of these secrets? Just to one. And if it turns out to be significant, then what kind of lost world might open up to people today if a few more, or indeed all, of them should be revealed? But where and in what millennia should we look for an answer? Rome. Ancient Rome. Something extraordinary happened there 4,000 years ago, more extraordinary than the exploits of the Roman legion. Oh yes, that's it, an incredible discovery. The Roman senators were the highest elite group of that period. They were slave owners, but all at once they began to give their slaves, who were skilled and desirous of growing food crops on the land, they began to give them land for their lifetime use, with the right of succession. Funds were allocated to a slave's family to build a house. A slave's family could not be transferred to another owner without their land. The land, became an inseparable part of the slave's family. But what suddenly moved these slave owners to such a humane and altruistic act? Was it purely from kind and noble motives, or did they receive something in return? What they received was 10% of the harvest for their table. That is probably the smallest tax of the whole known period. This begs the question, why did the Roman elite do such a thing? After all, the slave owner could have simply ordered his slaves to work in his fields by the sweat of their brow and take as much of the harvest as he wanted to. But no. Why? Because back in pagan Rome, they had still hung onto the Vedic knowledge. And the patricians and senators knew that the same product grown by a slave on land other than his own would differ sharply in its properties from that grown on his own ground and raised with love. Back then, they still knew that everything growing in the ground carries in itself a psychic energy. To be healthy, one must feed one's self with lovingly grown produce. This was mentioned in several ancient books in the Alexandria library, which was destroyed. What further knowledge, what wisdom was lost along with these books? Anastasia says that it is possible to resurrect this knowledge and all its attendant wisdom, beginning with their pristine origins within one's self. Everybody has the ability to do it. I want to believe that statement, but I'm still not fully convinced. Where can we find proof that such a thing is possible? What facts can we draw upon from memory so that we can fully accept what she says? Are we to remember everything we heard from our father and mother, or that we were taught in school or read somewhere over our whole lifetime? Our collections still do not contain any significant or absolute proof. What if I could remember everything that I was told by Father Feodoret? But he didn't say all that much. He spent most of the time listening, and while he did give me some ancient books to read, there was no evidence in them. Then how can modern man suddenly unfold within himself this treasured knowledge of his pristine origins? He can. No doubt there exist characteristic examples of proof in the recollection of every man. In my own recollections, I did come across one.